Take it away, John.
Okay, hello. Welcome to part 3 in our series of events on smart moves. If you're joining us for the very first time, my name is John Quinn. I'm sales counselor at Ring House, and we're located on the campus of Charles E. Smith Life Communities, which is home to over 1,100 residents. Some of our residents are living independently. Some need a little help and are living in assisted living. Others are living with memory care, and some residents are living at the Hebrew home and they're transitioning from a hospital. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite you to give me a call sometimes if you would like to tour our community. My number is 301-816-5050. Again, the number again is 301-816-5050 if you would like a tour. Now, in our last session, we explored clutter. But when you think about it, one person's clutter is another person's treasure. And in this session, our friends Jan Brito and Laura Quigley from Capital Senior Solutions and today's special guest, Daniel Sanders, will teach you how to distinguish between the two, and most importantly, how to profit from the process. And I'd like to take this opportunity before we move on to introduce our new colleague. Her name is Hannah, and Hannah, you might want to say hello, and then we'll continue on.
Am I the only one that can't hear Hannah? Is Hannah there?
Hannah's muted. Hannah's muted and her camera's off.
Okay, she might have stepped away. So we'll come back to Hannah. Go back. John, go ahead. You're muted now, John. John, you're muted.
I'm finished. I'm just turning it over to you then. Okay.
Okay.
Take it away.
Great. All right. So again, good morning, everyone. I'm Jan Brito. My business partner, Laura Quigley, is here with us. We are Capital Senior Solutions. So we are realtors who can help you with the sale of your home when the time comes. But what Capital Senior Solutions does is provide education and advocacy for older adults making late in life move decisions. And we do this through monthly seminars. We've partnered with Charles E. Smith Life Communities to do monthly seminars at the Ring House, and they're typically a hybrid presentation. Today is only on Zoom. And we also do monthly seminars at Lakewood Country Club in Rockville, as well as other speaking engagements throughout the community. And we'll give you a little more information about that at the end. Laura and I both have advanced designations in working with seniors. We're certified senior housing specialists, as well as certified senior downsizing coaches, because I'm sure you can imagine that when you start thinking about making a transition late in life, there's a lot of processing that goes on. And sometimes folks need help walking through, getting ready to start that adventure. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to our fabulous guest today, Daniel Sanders with For Sales. And you're really going to have a great time with today's presentation. We do want to make it very interactive. So if you have questions, raise your hand or unmute yourself. We'll answer them as we go along. And you can also put questions in the chat and we'll be monitoring that throughout as well. Good morning, Daniel. You're muted.
You think I'd have that mastered after after COVID. And anyway, great morning, Jan. Thanks for having me. Thanks to the Charles E. Smith community for hosting us. It's always a pleasure to speak with your potential and clients, your existing and potential clients, Jan. Absolutely wonderful. I would encourage anybody who feels comfortable doing so to turn on their camera. It does give me a little bit of feedback on see how I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation at this point. My name is Daniel Sanders. I own and operate a company in the area called For Sales. That's FOUR Sales Ltd. We're an estate sales, auctions, and tangible personal property appraisals company. So this session is personal property, things to know about valuing, keeping, tossing, and selling. So if anyone remembers the old skip, the keep it, toss it, skip, that's basically what we're going to do here. I can move forward. Great. So again, my name is Daniel Sanders. I'm the president and CEO of For Sales, FOUR Sales Ltd. We've been in business continuously since 1972. So we are in our 51st year of continuous operation. And we are the largest professional estate sales, auctions, and tangible personal property appraisals company in the greater DC area. So what is tangible personal property? It's not houses. We leave houses to Jan and her team. We deal with the stuff inside, those things you can't move with you. We have served well in excess of 7,000 clients over the last 51 years. We actually serve between 450 and 475 clients each and every year. Our job is quite simple. Our job is to help you simplify what can be very emotionally taxing, what can be physically straining, and that is dealing with the items that you are not moving with you to your new home. For Sales as a company is exceptionally committed to the community. We do a whole host of charitable fundraising as part of our efforts. We volunteer our charity auctioneering services to local area charities. Now, that's pretty much it for me, other than to use my company as a point of reference, or my own experience in the company as a point of reference. I do make my presentations agnostic, so I'm not selling For Sales. I'm selling the process. I'm trying to educate you on the process that you need to consider as you move forward. So before we jump into talking about personal property, are there any questions at this point that I can answer for anyone?
I don't see anything in the chat, Daniel, but for the attendees, if you want to unmute and ask a question, you are most welcome to do so.
Please do. I have no problem being interrupted. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to keep moving unless there's a question. So what are the learning objectives that we have for today? We want to understand the importance of personal property and what it's worth, and methods to sell them. So this is about, what do you have, what's it worth, and how do I get rid of it? Not to put too fine a point on it. Now, personal property, it's funny because it is the most emotional piece of what you do. There are occasions, but generally speaking, a home is not emotional. There is emotion tied with the idea of being home, but stuff tends to be extremely emotional. And so you have this thing, which is typically 0.1% of the value of the real estate that's driving the decision process on selling a home. So in other words, the tail does wag the dog in this case. The thing that we always keep in mind at For Sales is that it's not business, it's personal. Everything we do has enormous emotional impact. So as I said, it's the lowest piece of value, your investments, your real estate, your IRAs, your retirement, your pensions. These are all things that are worth far more than the items in most homes. I mean, there are exceptions, but that's really the 1% of people. But what we're dealing with, what you're dealing with, is separation anxiety. These are things that you've had around you your entire life, and the thought of being without them is challenging. Essentially, it's a back and forth conversation between emotional value and economic value. Now, I'm a very pragmatic person, as Jan, I'm sure, will attest. I'm a very pragmatic person. I'm all about the numbers, because my job is to help you generate as much revenue as possible from the items that you are choosing not to move with you. Our job, and the job of anyone dealing in the senior market, is to not underestimate the importance of emotional impact. So that's kind of what we're tackling here. The net effect of having this emotional turmoil, and I'm sure there are people in the audience today who are experiencing this anxiety about parting with their things. You end up in a scenario of paralysis by analysis. So you don't actually do what you need to do when you need to do it, because you're trying to figure out how to do with the thing, what to do with these things. that generally leads to one of two effects. Either making the decision to make your move too late when it's tougher to get into a community where you have all of a sudden a medical need and you've got to make a move, and it changes your options and it changes the access and it changes the way you can go about doing it. And the other thing that people tend to do is they wait, and then they go and they start giving away, selling, donating too much stuff and hurt themselves in as far as a managed resale process, and also end up giving away things that they would rather have kept. So, time is your friend. Time is your friend. The more time you can give yourself to step through a transition, the easier it's going to be. So are there any questions at this point before we move to the next section?
Yes, Daniel. Let me see here. Someone is asking, they were introduced to a rarity auctions. Are you a competitor and one should look at both companies?
Well, a rarity operates differently. A rarity is an old friend of mine. I know Lori James, who's the owner of the company, quite well. But I was actually on the founding board of the National Estate Sales Association. So I kind of know everybody. A rarity competes with us to some extent. Their model is almost exclusively online sales. So virtually everything that they sell is sold in an online format where things are listed in what is effectively an online auction. Everything starts at $1 and it moves up through the interest of the audience. We're going to come back and talk about the online only models later on. I will come back to that as a subject if that's okay. But a rarity is a good company. Lori's very nice. I mean, there are a lot of good companies out there. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. Very few have the breadth and depth of experience and knowledge that we do with for sales. But this is about finding a partner that fits you. I do caution people to be careful with the online only model. And again, we'll come back to that and talk about some of the strengths and the pros and cons, the strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so let's talk about understanding the value of personal property. So there's always a conversation of emotion versus economic value. So what is an appraisal? You hear lots of fancy terms. At the end of the day, the technical definition of an appraisal, it is that it is one qualified person's opinion of the value for an object at a given moment in time for an intended purpose. So for example, let's say you have a set of, a set of china, and that set of china at the same moment in time can have 3 different values. If you want to donate it, it's worth so much. If you want to sell it yourself, it's worth so much. And if you want to insure it, it's worth more. Doesn't mean it's actually worth more, but it has to do with how valuation is done. And so if the intended purpose is to donate it, it has a value level that's appropriate in the donation market. If you want to sell it yourself, then you're looking at that point where a willing seller meets a willing buyer. China is not going to be the place where that happens, but still, it's a good example. And fair market value, which is the willing seller, willing buyer approach, exists on a spectrum. Check myself. So retail replacement or insurance value is the highest valuation, because the idea is, God forbid something happens, your house burns down, and now you need to replace the items in your home. So you have to be adequately insured, and what establishes the value of your items is what's called an insurance or a retail replacement value, and that number is what it would cost to replace the item with same or similar in the current market. Fair market value is the price at which an object changes hands between a willing seller and a willing buyer. That itself exists on this spectrum, because if you have an unwilling seller and a willing buyer, chances are the price is going to go up. If you have a willing seller and an unwilling buyer, chances are the price is going to go down because you're looking for that intersection. And then donation value, you got to be careful there always to not overstate values of items that you're donating, because that is a surefire way to end up in an audit. That and home office use are the two drivers typically. Things that are kind of interesting. So silver is an silver is an interesting one, particularly in Maryland, because Maryland state law restricts the amount that insurance can pay out on an insurance claim for silver, unless you have a personal articles policy or a rider on your insurance policy. So state law restricts the value of sterling silver that is stolen and claimed at $1,775. And unless the number has changed, that's what it was. Unless you have an appraisal, and that appraisal drives a personal articles policy, which is an addendum to your property and casualty insurance, that states that it's worth more. Is that clear for everyone? Be great to get an acknowledgement somewhere.
Yeah, no comments yet in the
Okay, great.
chat,
All right.
John.
So, so again, just for Maryland specifically, you've got to be careful when it comes to the value of silver, because there's a restriction unless you have that personal articles policy. So when do you value items? You value very high-end items. You want to make sure that you have, and you can have multiple riders, multiple personal articles policies on the same insurance account. They can be in different categories. So I have one, for example, I have, my daughters were both musicians. They have very expensive instruments. So their instruments are on a personal articles policy. I have a very expensive antique grandfather clock that has also on its own rider or its own personal articles policy. You might have one for jewelry. You might have one for your silver. So high-end items you want to value and make sure that they're adequately covered for insurance purposes. You might want to value items when you're moving. So for example, we just had a client who was shipping a painting worth about $15,000 from their current address to a new home. And the shipper wanted an insurance appraisal to make sure that it was adequately covered in case it got damaged in transit. You're going to want an appraisal or evaluation when you're donating, not for your everyday goods, but the restriction on donation value is $5,000 per year under the IRS regulations. Anything over $5,000, you need to have, and that's cumulative, it's not individual item. You need to have a donation appraisal done to support it, along with the appropriate IRS forms. One of the things, if you're giving a higher value item, so an individual item, we recently did an appraisal for a rug that was a needlepoint rug that was being donated from a high-end buyer to the Mellon Foundation. It was actually something that was purchased from the Mellon estate a decade ago, and now they're donating it to one of the Mellon museums. And in order to do that, they did a personal, an appraisal, a donation appraisal of the rug, and then they also combined that with a donation. What I'm looking for. A contract between themselves and the receiving charity, because if the charity were to dispose, sell, or get rid of the rug within a 3-year window, the economic write-off of the donation would actually have been reversed, and it would have become income to the donor.
What would the process be? I don't own a lot of things, but I have musical instruments that are, I guess, high value. So would I get it appraised, or do I fill out a form? How does it work?
you would get it appraised. You would call us and we would come in and on an hourly basis, do an appraisal of your instruments for insurance replacement value. You would then take that written report and go to your insurance carrier and say, I'd like to add a personal articles policy in the amount of whatever the number is. Now, for example, Liberty Mutual, and I'm not plugging anybody, I just happen to know this number. Liberty Mutual offers a $50,000 personal articles policy, a rider, for $19.99 a year. So you can have several of those, but you would do a rider, a personal articles policy for your musical instruments, and the value would be somewhere between 0 and 50,000, but it would be effectively separately insured from the rest of your household goods.
Okay,
Okay, does that make sense?
yes.
All right,
Daniel, we do have a question in the chat.
sure.
Is the silver limit true for silver coins as well?
You would, well, okay, if it were me, I would be putting the coins on a separate personal articles policy. So it's yes, it's silver, but a coin collection is worth more than its silver value in many cases. There's numismatic, when you talk about coins, you talk about the silver value or the gold value of the coin, so the bullion value, but you also talk about the numismatic value. So what is it worth as a collectible? So my question back to the person who asked that is, are we talking about coins that are slabbed and graded, by PGC or somebody else? Are they more than, or are they just loose silver dollars?
Okay, so if the person who asked that question would like to either unmute or clarify in the chat, and then a new question just popped in.
Sure.
What is the best way to go about selling silver dollars?
Oh, call me. The short answer is call me. What you don't want to do is you don't want to take it to your local jewelry shop. You're going to get pennies on the dollar. Well, maybe not pennies. You might get nickels on the dollar as opposed to fair market value. We've got a very comprehensive system for the resale of coins, and we coins and silver and other things. And we make sure that we're able to accomplish top dollar for those items. So the one thing you don't want to do is go to the local jewelry shop and sell it to them, because he'll be happy to buy it from you for a song. And then if they're better coins, we can do it one of two ways. Either we can find what we call a deep pockets hard money buyer, so somebody who offers real money and understands that we're not going to accept a throwaway bid, and sell them for you and take a small, earn a small commission, small finder's fee for doing so. Or we can take it, better coins, numismatic coins, and place them in a high-end auction where they will be sold, and that typically takes a little bit longer. But if they are truly numismatic value coins, it may well be worth doing that, because you're going to realize the true fair market value of the items.
These are
Okay.
coins. These are coins that were purchased, like for investment, but they're packaged or in albums, but they're all in packages. Is that numismatic or?
So like first day cover type coins, or
I'm not sure. Some of them are, countries or periods in time, certain
okay,
collections.
yeah, so that warrants a quick review, or like a physical review, but chances are they're going to have some numismatic value. But for example, like we see a lot of is, we know exactly what year people have had their first grandchild, because they will start having mint sets the year their first grandchild was born. That should, in a room, in a face-to-face setting, that would have elicited a chuckle. It should have, at least. So, I mean, you go in there and all of a sudden there's no coins anywhere, but all of a sudden you have the annual mint set starting in 1976, and they every year until the kids hit their late teens, and then it fades away. Those, sure, they have numismatic value, but they're only worth $6 to $7 in most cases per package. They're not worth a whole lot. But the answer to your question is, we would need to see what you're talking about to give you a clear answer.
Great, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Daniel,
Yes, ma'am.
Claudia is asking, would you value Yadro collection?
Absolutely. I'll value it. I'll sell it and do whatever you need with it. We're still, that's one of the few figurine manufacturers that's still holding relatively strong. You know, the prices in most of these collectible categories are somewhat diminished over the last 10 years. And that's mostly driven by the sheer volume of stuff that's come into the marketplace as baby boomers have aged. But gutters are still have interest, particularly the big ones. The large ones can generate several thousands of dollars. Does that answer the question, Claudia?
Yes, David, thank you so much. And I want to make a quick comment that I went to the location this morning. I'm across the street now in Panera because I didn't know that everything was online today.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I hope you're enjoying a delicious breakfast.
My mom is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So the
thank you
two-
for joining us.
The two other times to do personal property appraisals is when you're doing your estate planning, because you might want to give certain things to certain members of your family, to certain kids. And when you do that, you need to be able to designate that. So using an appraisal as a tool to do so is very good. And then also with estate settlement, and that's where we're going to deal with estate or fair market value for estate tax filing purposes. Most important thing is actually to know when not to value. If you're going to sell something, you don't necessarily, unless it's a very high-end item, you don't need to get it appraised in order to sell it. All you're doing is reducing money from the bottom line. And yes, I am talking myself out of work right now. That's exactly what you hear me doing. I, generally speaking, will decline to do an appraisal a paid appraisal when somebody wants to sell something, unless it's something very particular, because it's a waste of your money and it ends up putting less money in your pocket. You might notice that I say ironic images alert on these photos. These people are grinning to absolutely, they must be hurting themselves. They're grinning so hard. That is not how most people feel when they're looking at moves. And what we want to do is we want to get you there, but it's not as easy as it seems. I'm going to keep moving if that's okay.
Yeah, we've got several more questions, but we can hold them until later.
Sure. What do you got?
Okay, let me see in the order they were received.
Because you're seeing something different than I am. I'm not. Oh, here we go. All right.
What items are you not comfortable appraising? For example, antiques.
I can appraise anything you want, and if I don't know how to do it myself, I have partners that I can bring in. For example, I did even while I'm away, I'm out of town right now, folks. I was able to complete 2 appraisals. I had one of my graduate gemologists gather the information, and they'll be co-signatories on the appraisal report that I'm writing. Let's see. All right, Yadros, let's see. But so the answer is if there's something that's really odd and can't be appraised, you know, I'm the first person to admit that. I had a lady who wrote in yesterday about a painting her father had painted, and all I can say is, I'm sorry, it's just not worth any real money. You know, I'm not going to charge you. I'm not going to charge you $200 per hour to tell you something I can see, which is that it's not going to be worth anything. Dimes are in a piggy bank. Okay, so we'd be happy to take a look at the dimes for you. If the dimes are Mercury dimes, so they have the winged Mercury on it, then that is going to be something they're worth about $1.10 a piece. And we should be able to get most of that for you, depending on the current price of silver. Very old Hummel figurines. Hummel figurines are that's a very, very soft market space. Everybody's seen the little cutie German figurines. The little ones sell for $5, $6. The big ones can sell up to about $300. The really, like the little boy with the umbrella, the very large scale one that's, you know, sizable. That one would sell up to about $300. Old American flag. Any kind of model train is great. 027 gauge trains are good money. 2 single bed mattress and frame. Yes, just donate those or throw them away, one or the other, because then charities might not be able to take a bed or take a mattress. So this painting that's on the screen here was one of the ones. I'm going to keep going, folks, if that's okay. This painting that's on the screen was in the basement of a home. We ran an estate sale there. I went to see the lady and I walked in and I went, that's a good painting. And she said, well, my mother always said that, but I don't know anything about it. I said, I do. I happen to have been reading an article about subcontinental Indian modernists, coincidentally, the week before. And we ended up offering this for sale at the estate sale with a firm price because we knew what it was worth in the marketplace, and ended up not selling it intentionally, taking it to an auction to be sold, and it ended up selling for $87,500. It's not my taste, but worked for somebody. Let's see. Here we go. All right. So what are the ways you can go about selling personal property? Are there any other questions before we jump into all of this? All right. Hearing and seeing none, please feel free to
Actually,
ask.
I
Sorry?
didn't unmute quick enough, sorry.
Okay.
Someone is asking, I'm downsizing and have 2 single beds, mattresses
I
on.
answered that. I answered that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mattresses fall under the local jurisdictional bed bug laws. And so you've got to be, careful about that. Some charities, like a Wider Circle, will take good quality, clean mattresses, but they're looking for mostly queen size, if I'm not mistaken. So I did answer that one. All right. So sorry. Hello? Hello? Okay, somebody started to speak. It's okay. Just go ahead and interrupt. So let's talk about the ways of selling personal property. So what does sell? Crystal, china, silver, porcelain, figurines, glass, paperweight, stamps, coins, artwork, jewelry, antiques, collectibles, tools, vehicles, good hardwood furniture, and anything else that's legal, moral, and ethical, basically. That's what we sell. If you can think of it and it's legal to sell, we will try to sell it. Doesn't always sell, but we will certainly give it our very best effort every single time. And all right. We'll even sell an RV. This RV was market. So if you went to buy it new, was $64,000. Its fair market value was 38. We sold it for 42. So this is all about having the right venue to sell these things. This is one of my favorites. I love this thing. Anybody want to guess what it is?
Music stand?
Yes, got it in one. That's correct. It's a music stand. So this is by an artist. I happen to like woodwork and I know a little bit about it, and it is really something spectacular. It was hiding in the corner of these people's apartment. The best place to sell gold jewelry, give me a call. We'll be happy to help. We're getting top dollar for those types of items, and we're very reasonable in our commissions. So the music stand was hiding. I was there to appraise a Diego Rivera painting, and I saw that, and they said, well, is there anything else in the house that we should look at, getting valued while you're here? I said, that I didn't even turn around. I'd seen it when I walked in. I said, the music stand by Michael Coffey. They said, how in God's name did you know that? I can't tell you. All I do is read books about this kind of stuff. That music stand is worth about $27,000 in today's market value.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I maybe it makes me laugh because when my kids were little, as I said, they were musicians. One day I was leafing through an auction catalog, and there was a contemporary of Michael Coffey's who they had a music stand for sale, and the girls looked over my shoulder and, oh, that's great, Papa. We would love to play music off of that stand. And I looked at them and I said, neither of you is good enough. Don't even think about it. I said, you're good, but you're not that good. It was a $125,000 music stand by a very famous wood sculptor. Okay, so all right, so here's your basic 7 ways to sell tangible personal property: on-site sales, live auctions, online estate sales, buyouts, which is where somebody just buys it for cash, auction brokerage, which is high-end items placed in high-end auctions, consignment services, and individual or eBay services. Okay. Jen, is there a chance that you could chat for a few minutes? I've got to unplug my truck from the supercharger real quick. I'm sorry to do that.
Sure.
I don't have a choice. I just got to unplug and move real quick.
Okay,
Okay.
no problem.
All right. I'm
Yeah,
just gonna stop my video, and if you could take over for just a minute.
absolutely. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Daniel had expected to be with us in person, but some unexpected events have caused him to be on Zoom and parked at a car charger. So bear with us while we get him back online. And as I mentioned previously, please feel free to unmute and ask questions at any time or even make comments. Daniel loves interactive presentations. And if you want to see him in person, we actually have him coming to Lakewood Country Club next week on Wednesday at 11 a.m. for the same presentation, but he'll be in person. And he's a ton of fun in person. It's a whole different experience. It's way more interactive and informative. So yeah.
Hi, sorry, do you mind putting on the chat the information about where it's going to be in person?
Oh yeah, sure. We'll do that.
Thank you.
Heads up.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to be moving into an over 62 place in 2 years. And I've started cleaning out closets and drawers and things like that, but it looks like I haven't touched anything. So how do I go about starting to work on the bigger things? I have children who are out of town who might want some things, and there are things I can't obviously take with me to a small place. So where do I start with that, and when should I start?
Well, I think you're starting now is a good idea because 2 years seems like a long time. But as you've probably discovered, when you
Yeah,
start going
goes
through things,
fast.
you feel like you haven't made any progress, right? Because it takes so long. So starting way in advance is a really good thing. And are you familiar with professional move managers?
No.
These are folks that help people just like you in sorting through items, labeling, tagging, getting them to donation points, getting them sold, getting things packed and moved. They can even make a floor plan for you of your new home
I do need that.
with the items that you want to take with you to make sure things will fit. And, you know, they are called move managers, but even though your move may not happen for 2 years, you could certainly start working with them now. And
Okay.
if you'd like to reach out to us afterwards, our contact information will be on the screen and in the chat before we end. We'd be happy to refer you to some move managers that you could interview.
Okay, thank you. And I live in Virginia. Does that matter?
It does not matter.
Okay.
Where in Virginia?
Oakton,
Oakton,
it's
okay,
Fairfax County.
Sure.
Yep,
Is
I've got three sales calls in Oakton this week. So anyway, okay, I'm
Thank
back.
you.
Sorry about that, folks. I apologize. Pretty cool though. There's a Chevy test vehicle for their pickup truck that was charging next to me. It's kind of neat. So anyway, all right. Am I back? Am I good?
You're good.
Okay, so let's see. All right, so you've got all these ways. Let's go through them. All right. On-site estate sales, that's the business that For Sales has been in for the last 51 years. On-site estate sales, where people come to the location, are still generating great returns. So what are the pros and the cons? You can offer virtually everything in the home as long as it's not dirty, broken, disgusting, or whatever. Whereas if you go off-site, you have to be more selective. You have more control over the price because an on-site estate sale is a controlled descent in price. So our pricing experts, our appraisers, will value everything in the home as part of setting up the sale, and it's valued for the purposes of resale. And then we control the discounting over the course of the weekend because an estate sale has 3 phases. Maximize your return while keeping the inventory moving and make it go the heck away. And the discounts match up to that. It draws heavily on the local community. It's relatively straightforward and simple, at least for a company like ours. There are some companies that will take weeks to prepare an estate sale. We set up a new estate sale every single week, sometimes 2. You're looking for professionalism in the companies you work with. You're looking for the convenience of getting it done. The big thing is you got to get your stuff and get out and let us do our thing, you know, and if you need to have 1 or 2 rooms blocked off with your stuff, we can usually work around that. It's a very, and for me, this is probably the biggest thing on this chart. It's a very respectful way of closing a chapter in your life. We can help you go from this step, this phase to the next phase and find good homes. We can rehome the items in your home in a way that makes you feel good about them. We're going to find, we specialize, at least at For Sales, in making sure that we focus on finding buyers who will take your items, absorb them into their home, and make them part of their family story. Some of the cons, you've got to have enough enough volume, value, and variety to make it work. There is a percentage of looky-loos, and there are some people who really don't want the neighbors looking. Well, okay, that's beyond my control at a certain point. It's a public sale or it's not. When I say wear and tear, I'm talking about normal wear and tear, very limited. You can run an estate sale. I see a question in the chat box. You can run an estate sale with people in a person's home before they moved out, but it does add some additional challenges. It just means everybody's got to do a little bit more of a workaround. The bigger thing is we don't want to have half the furniture in the living room sitting in the living room and not available for sale. Because the one thing that I can guarantee you after doing this day in and day out for 17 years is that if I mark an object not for sale, I guarantee that's the only thing that people are going to keep asking me about. Just the nature of shoppers.
Hey, Daniel.
Yes, ma'am.
It's Laura Quigley. Just want to make a suggestion. I don't know if everyone is looking at the chat. So when you are answering a question in the chat, do you mind just reading it or
Oh, no problem.
summarizing it before you answer it?
Okay, so the question I answered was, I assume you do an estate sale after a person has moved out. The answer is ideally yes, absolutely required no. Okay. So this is a picture of a living room. It's actually a combination living room, dining room that has been set up. There was a lot of stuff in that house. There was a lot of stuff in that house. This one, I love this. This is where you find these surprises and you never know what's in people's homes. This is an artist, was a DC native artist from the 1970s, Kenneth Victor Young. And this painting was worth about somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000. And I realize that most people don't have this in their home, but it's kind of cool when you come across it. And we had people telling us that there was no way we would get it sold and meet the client's requirements. And I love hearing that because it just makes me more determined. We sold that during the on-site estate sale, did not have to move this 6 feet by 6 feet canvas. The thing's huge. And it would have had to been packed and crated and moved and all of the rest of it. We sold it for $85,000. Bing, bang, boom, done. Moving on. And they got every penny that it was worth because there's a little bit of, you can see how dirty it is across the top there. There was a smoker in the house and it just was hell on this painting. So estate sales and auctions by the numbers. The thing is, when you run an estate sale well, you're going to sell between 85 and 95% of the value and 65 and 75% of the physical content. So there's always going to be stuff left over. We've been doing this a long time. We expect to see about 1,000 people through a property over 2.5 days. They're not all there at once. That's why it's so important that you have this broad range of things so that everybody is able to have something for them to buy at the price point they can afford. And you get them in on the half-used bottle of cleaning solution, and they end up walking out with a dining room table and chairs, or they come in for the dining room table and chairs, and they walk out having acquired a whole lot of artwork. It's really quite a remarkable process. So I can't speak to other companies, but I can speak about how we do this. Our average employee duration, which is pretty amazing for a retail entity, our average employee duration is between 14 and 15 years right now. Our oldest staff member is about to turn 80, and he works every single week and he loves every minute of it. As you can see, our employees are always smiling. This is a kind of a crazy way to earn a living. We like to think that our job, our real mission is to give a positive experience for our clients, our customers, and our staff. So live auctions is the second bullet point. If we think back to the chart of the 7 different ways to do this. At live auction, you need to be a little bit more selective about what you offer for sale. Every auction has an upside or a downside. The reality is that people don't go to auction to pay top dollar. But our goal is to get them to pay as much as the market will bear. And as long as you have enough bidders present, you will represent fair market value. It's a guaranteed sale because we sell no minimum, no reserve, absolute to the highest bidder. And we have enough bidders to make sure that we're always confident that fair market value has been achieved. There's a little bit of benefit to timing and flexibility because we can typically do an auction pickup within 2 weeks of the date of contracting. And we don't have to sell it right away. We can take it into our storage and hold on to it until we have the right auction to put it into. This is all about getting the people to show up for these things. And we're very, very good at it, of course. I see a question, what do we earn on a sale? Well, we always get compensated on a commission basis. So smaller, jewelry and coin transactions are going to be a smaller percentage, anywhere from 10 to 25, depending on what the item is. But in the case of an on-site estate sale, the average rate in the DC area is 30%. And for our auctions, we charge 40%. So it's a commission of 30 to 40%, depending on the format in which we're selling things. And then there are specialty items, whether it's jewelry, cars, coins, or firearms. We also have our federal firearms license, which is an absolute must when it comes to selling any type of firearm in this day and age. And the question I received.
David, yes, I have a question. You said that between 30 and 40% for live auctions. What is the percentage for estate sales?
Well, it's 30 to 40% depending on the format. An on-site estate sale is 30%, and going to auction is 40%. But don't get too hung up on the difference between the one and the other, because the net proceeds, and that's really what this is about, is almost exactly the same from one model to the other, as long as you're using the right format for the right project. It just distributes the costs into different spots is all. One of the big things that I did, does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. So one of the big things I want to just take a moment to talk about is reserves. So what if you say, well, I want to send my stuff to auction, but I don't want to sell anything for less than whatever the number is? That's called a reserve. Reserves are tricky. It's actually much easier with high-end auctions and high-end auction houses. But if you're trying to sell the bulk of what people are selling day in and day out, that is a much more challenging proposition because it changes the tone and tenor of the auction. Because as auctioneers, we are required to say there is a reserve, there is a minimum on this particular item. And we don't have to say what it is, and we shouldn't say what it is, but then we have to wait until it passes the reserve and they say, and the reserve has been released. The problem with that is that the crowd, the bidding population, reacts very badly to reserves. What they say is, oh, well, that owner thinks they know more about their stuff than we do. And that's just not the case. And so then the bidders will actually stop bidding and teach you a lesson. The problem with that is that it impacts the entirety of the auction. And so we as a company have elected not to do that. I mean, with some very exceptionally rare exceptions, because it just messes up the bidding so badly. This is a great example. This was an owner who wanted This is a 1967 Ford Thunderbird. It's absolutely gorgeous. It was worth $32,000. The owner would not go work without a reserve, was absolutely determined that he would not sell without a reserve. So we talked about it and we said, well, what's the reserve you want? He said, well, I don't want a reserve less than 25. And we're like, okay, well, 25 we can live with because we know it's worth more. This was an exception because we knew it was worth more. We ended up selling it for $37,000. I mean, it's, you know, that then in that case, the reserve didn't matter. But it could have gone totally the other way. All right, let's talk about online auctions and estate sales. So nowadays you see people talking about online estate sales. Well, an online estate sale is nothing more than a glorified Facebook marketplace or an online auction, one or the other, depending on the format that's being used. You have to be, you have to be very almost cynical about this approach. I mean, it makes a lot of sense and it worked very well during the pandemic for what it did. The pros are it has exposure, lots of exposure, but it's really based on how much traffic the site gets. There's always the possibility of an upside, but there's also the massive possibility of a downside because everything starts at $1 in this particular format. You can, we can feed one audience into the other. You have the opportunity to sell these items with detailed descriptions, which you might not see in other formats. The terms and conditions of sale are extraordinarily rigid on these things. The argument that the online sales, online auctions, online estate sales people make is there are millions of people on the internet. True, can't really argue with that. But the reality is that there are only maybe 100, 150 to 200 people in the local area that are actually looking at these local area auctions because they're almost all picked up only. And if they're shipping, then the shipping changes the prices a whole lot too. So you got to take this with a grain of salt. You can end up with stuff if people fail to pay or pick up, which means they're going to have clearing expenses. And the prices for mundane average things that we might sell at an estate sale but wouldn't take to our auction center are going to sell for abysmal prices, and you're going to feel it. You run the risk of being upside down. So most of these online sales will charge anywhere from $2,000 to $3,500 to set up the online sale. And then some of them, and again, I can't speak to other people's terms. I mean, and I'm doing this in an educational format. But the things to watch out for is you're going to have a base fee to set it up. There might be a lot minimum. So let's say there's a $7 lot minimum or a $5 lot minimum. Well, if you sell your item for $1, you've prepaid your $3,500 to set up the auction. Then you sell a particular item for $1. You have a lot minimum of $5. So now you're -4. You've just lost $4. And they get their commission. So they get 35, I think it's typically 35% for online auctions. They're going to get 35 cents out of your $1. And all of that leads you to a net negative of $4.35 for that one particular item. Now, maybe the auction as a whole ends up being positive, but you're putting a whole lot of faith in average stuff selling for more than a couple of dollars. And you just have to be aware where the market is. How can you I've got a question here. How can I determine the value of something I own to know whether or not I'm being offered less than it is worth? For example, 12-inch high Steve Penguin that has the Steve tag on it. Well, part of that is having trusted partners. You need to find the people to help you, ma'am, sir, ma'am, no, ma'am, Helen, that are going to be trustworthy and going to tell you what it's worth. But then keep in mind, they're only going to buy if they're a buyer for purposes of resale. They have to buy it at a price that they can resell it and make some money on it. Otherwise, there's no point in them buying it. Did that answer the question, Helen? Helen, are we good?
Hold on. It sort of does. What prompts the question is I had somebody from a place called Curiosity Shops in Rockville
Uh-huh.
walked through the house and took a whole bunch of toys dating back to the 1960s, a soapstone chess set bought in Africa back in the 60s, ended up giving me a lump sum for the several items, about 2 dozen items he took. And I was just wondering, in retrospect, whether he took advantage of me because I didn't know what these items were worth. And I didn't know how to
did they
find
take
out
them-
what they were worth.
Did they take them on consignment and sell them in their shop and they give you a percentage of the
No, he
sale
just
price?
bought them from me right out, and then he's going to take them to his shop.
Well, then and sell them for his own benefit.
Yes,
Is that what you're saying?
yes, he came in.
Chances are you got underpaid. Chances are you got underpaid.
I'm
I
sorry.
can't speak to it. I haven't seen the items, but you really
Mhm.
have to be careful to vet the people that you're asking to help you. You know, that's why Jan and Laura do these seminars, is to make sure that you have people you can trust available to you through them or through their team. I'm sorry, folks. I picked up a Michigan cold. It's really cold up there.
My sympathies.
Oof. But so, I mean, chances are you probably got underpaid. But I mean, a steep, you know, an older steep bear or stuffed animal should bring some, you know, some consequential money. I mean, it should be, you know, anywhere north of 40 and south of 400. It just depends on what it is exactly and how old and condition and all of that.
I have a related question.
Did that answer the question, Helen? Yes, sir.
I have an appraisal of our furniture and lithographs and craft items from 1976.
Uh-huh.
Is that valuable in helping me determine what things are worth now?
No, it is helpful. It is helpful in having an appraiser tell you what things are worth now.
Okay.
Anything
So
that
then,
so you have two things that have happened. First and foremost, not everything gains in value because it gains in age. The second thing is that we've seen a 60% decrease in all collectible categories in the last decade because of the sheer volume of stuff that baby boomers are releasing into the marketplace. So it's a good starting point because it helps identify items, but you'd really need to have current market knowledge to update that. But updating an existing appraisal is not that big a deal.
okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Anyone else? Helen, are we good?
Yeah, except I just, how, other than trusting someone to give me a decent appraisal of it, how do I have a basis for finding out, generally speaking, what something is worth?
Well, you can do that a number of different ways. I mean, there are pay resources available on the internet, but you'll spend a lot of time doing that. Your best bet, honestly, is to find trusted people and check their reviews. If you do a lot of business, you're going to have a bad review. Trust me on that one. You'll end up with a bad review somewhere, but the question is, what do you do with it? So if you see that someone has, you know, a couple of bad reviews out of 100 good reviews, you want to look and see, did they respond? Did they answer the questions that were being raised? And that's, you know, the reviews, Yelp and Google reviews are actually a very good starting point to determine who you might want to work with. You can always ask for references. Now, I mean, anybody worth their salt is going to give you good references, not bad references, but that's, you know, that's to be expected. And if you really, really want to know, then pay someone to do an appraisal. We also offer spot appraisal services where we can come in and do a verbal. So we do a walkthrough and just give you numbers, but we do charge you a minimum of an hour plus drive time for that. And we charge $200 an hour for appraisal services. But so that we can do. You say, well, that's a sort of a down and dirty, quick way to know if you're in the right ballpark.
Okay, thank you. Before you leave, will you put up a screen with your contact name and number?
I will, but actually Laura just put it in the chat box. I can see that she just did that again. Thank you, Laura.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then Claudia asked, assuming you host an estate sale and have some items left, what would you suggest a second option to sell the rest? All right, so interesting question. Good question, Claudia. We're running out of time. The reality is you will have things left over at the end of an estate sale. You will have 25 to 35% of physical contents, not value, physical contents left at the end of any given estate sale. And it's almost always going to be low value stuff and big bulky furniture. That's what's going to be left. If your estate sale was well run, then reoffering those items has little point. We can, as a company, we have a complete suite of clearance services, and we can help you empty out that space and make all of those items go away to donate, recycle, or dispose as appropriate. But as far as resale goes, you know, if a good company has brought 1,000, 1,200 people through that house in 2.5 days and nobody bought it, there's probably a reason. Claudia, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you. I
Okay.
think
All right, great. So this is one of my, this is an interesting one. And Laura, we are running out of time. How do you want me to do this here? Keep going?
We're scheduled till 11:30, so
Oh, okay. I thought it was an hour. Okay.
you're all
sorry.
good. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So analyzing, so this is interesting. This was my first real experience with an online sale. This goes back to, I think it was 2015 or something. So this was a house, we actually set this up as an on-site estate sale. We had set up the house, everything was good to go. And 2 days before the estate sale, the owner freaked out. I mean, lost her mind. I pick up the phone. I had no idea who it was. Picked up the phone and is yelling and screaming at me. And I don't even know who's on the phone. And I finally get her calmed down enough to understand what she's quote unquote asking me. And what she said was, I don't want to sell. There's 125 items that I want to pull from the sale. I don't want to sell them. Well, we were advertised. We had people coming. We said, okay, fine. We're not going to, it's Christmas time. We're not going to fight about this. And I sent an extra team of people in there. We pulled all of the stuff she didn't want sold to the side. We, moved heaven and earth to get this done. 9 months later, I see this online listing. 9 months later, the 125 items that she refused to have us sell, because her line was, you can't have them until I leave with a toe tag on. I hate that line, but that was her line. As you can see here, I circled in red. Only 4 items in the entire lot sold for more than $100. And in fact, the Hoosier cabinet that sold for I believe that says $165 was actually the most valuable thing in the home. And it should have sold. I had a hard money buyer for $875. She ended up selling it in an online auction for $165, if I'm reading that correctly. So you do have to be very careful with, how you go about something. Now, the next approach to selling personal property is called a buyout. There are very few buyout people left. Buyouts are where someone will offer you cash for your item. So I believe Helen was the one who had that experience.
Yes.
And the thing is, if somebody is buying you in a buyout, they're buying it for the purposes of resale. So they're buying your items in order to be able to resell them, which means they need to leave enough margin in there that they can make their own profit off. You're never, ever going to get top dollar in a buyout, but the good news, bad news is those people don't exist anymore. Not really. There's a handful still, and I wouldn't send business to any one of them because I don't trust that they would offer a fair market price. As a company, now I can't speak to other companies, but at For Sales, we never buy our clients' stuff, ever, never, because I consider it an ethical gray zone, and I refuse to be in a spot where I can be accused of doing something wrong. I would much rather sell it, be a seller's agent, and profit when the client profits. So in other words, the better you do, the better I do, because I'm on commission. Any questions about buyouts? Okay. I have about 300 books and a large record collection to sell. What vendor do you recommend? It's going to depend on what type of books they are. That's certainly something that Judith, I would encourage you to just reach out to us after this seminar is over sometime next week, and I will see what I can do to help. It's going to depend on what kind of books it is. I do have someone who specializes in buying book collections, and then we know a couple of record buyers, but again, it's going to depend on the category. So if they are classical, then forget about it. It's not going to sell at all because nobody's interested. Rock music on LPs is what people are interested in. The rock and jazz, some blues and R&B, but classical is never a winner. Show tunes are not a winner anymore. They were in the 1980s. They aren't anymore. Now, interesting factoid, the average album weighs 1.17 grams. The average disposal truck can handle about a 3-ton total, which is going to be, with album size, about half the volume of the truck. So you might not think you're getting a full truck, but albums, if you have to dispose of them, are extremely heavy between the album and the cover. I know because we've done that. So I've got a question here. I'm assuming that all of the places that advertise "we buy your gold, silver" will give you a low price. Is that true? Generally speaking, can't speak to everyone's business practices. Yes. If you want to get top dollar for your gold and silver or jewelry with stones or your coin collections, call me, please. I assure you that you will end up with a better price that you will end up with anywhere else. I don't do that myself, but I have a partner I work with, and we can make sure that you're getting top dollar. Okay. Does that answer the question, Alan? I'm assuming that's a yes.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, don't make that mistake. Call me instead. Okay? All right, so let's move on. Buyouts, auction brokerage. Auction brokerage is cool. Remember I told you the painting that we sent to auction and sold for $87,500? That's where you send a high-end auction to a high-end auction item, an auction house for a specialty sale. Fantastic when you have the stuff. What's really good right now is good quality baseball cards from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and earlier. 80s, 90s, and 2000s mean nothing dollar-wise. 1970s or earlier, down to the 1914 tobacco cards. I sold a baseball card series from 1951 last month for $58,750. And I've got a whole host of other baseball card collections coming up with a specialty reseller. So baseball cards are good. Sports cards are good. Football cards are uninteresting, but basketball and baseball can be very interesting. I mean, there's exceptions to every rule. And then we did an Antiques Roadshow type thing, and what we call the Appraisals Roadshow. And somebody showed up with a Pistol Pete Maravich basketball card graded as a 9, I think it was. Thing was worth over $40,000. He had no idea what he had. It was great. You should have seen his face when we told him. So the pros for auction brokerage is it's great for high-end auction items, and it can deliver significant financial results. The cons are that it does take time. So those cards that we sold last month have been in our possession, not our possession, but at the auction house for almost 6 months before they got sold. So you do have to have more patience in all of this. This is one of the best pieces of silver I've ever sold. This thing was phenomenal. It sold for crazy money. It was a antique French centerpiece. Absolutely stunning. Thing weighed a ton too. So I've got a question here. We lost a piece of sculpture in a move. Long story. We sued the movers. We had a copy of the appraisal used by the Artist Museum, but the judge decried reliance on it because he said the museum, of course, they would value it high for coverage. He said we should have gone to an independent appraiser. I am not going to second guess the judge, but I would have gone. What I would have done is what we did recently for about $2.6 million of contemporary art. Is we wrote the appraisal. These are paintings that are all going out on international tour. And once the report was done, I sent it to the client. And I suggested that he send it to both his insurance agent and the underwriter and have them review the appraisal report and respond to him in writing that they agreed that the report was satisfactory in advance of anything possibly happening. So you can't always go to the underwriter, but I would go to an independent appraiser, because most museums, the Smithsonian's, for example, will not value items. They won't do it. They used to. They don't do it anymore.
Hmm.
Does that answer the question, Raymond?
Yes. And
Yes.
yes, this is his wife. His voice
Okay.
is not, his voice
Right,
is
so
not.
I mean, it's not on me to, yes, ma'am, it's not on me to dispute what the judge decided, but I do think that the value of an independent appraiser is that it doesn't have a vested interest in the artwork, where any museum could be argued does have a vested interest, which is essentially what it sounds like you were thinking.
Right. Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Really sorry about my Michigan cold focus. All right, consignment. So consignment shops is not a bad way to deal with certain kinds of items. They used to give good financial results. They give less, because the thing that most people take to consignment stores is going to be either clothing, crystal, or china. Generally speaking, mostly clothing. Attendance at consignment shops is a little more haphazard, and the people who are shopping there are almost without fail people who are looking to, it's either clothing to wear or stuff that they can resell on eBay or elsewhere. Time frames of how long they offer things at consignment shops can vary. You really have to be specific about the types of items you bring them, and you need to be super, super, super careful with consignment store contracts, because many consignment store contracts will have a clause in there that says that we will try to sell your item for 6 months. And after 6 months, you have 30 days to come get it. And if you don't get it, then we'll deal with it ourselves. In other words, they make it theirs after 7 months, because most people forget they have stuff at consignment stores, and there's usually not an obligation to advise in those contracts. So in other words, we get to the end of the 6-month period, they've offered your item at a ridiculously high price and not gotten a buyer. Let me put this in context. I'm being a little bit harsh on the selling environment, because I want you to understand the risk. Okay, I'm not actually pro or con consignment store. I'm just saying you have to be aware of the risk. The risk is you sign a contract, and the deal is that they'll try to sell your stuff at a price they determine for 6 months. So theoretically, they set the price ridiculously high. I've seen it on crystal, where they set it, 2 times, 3 times market price. It doesn't sell over the course of the 6 months. They don't have an obligation to notify you that your 6 months is up, and after 30 days it becomes theirs, and then you see the exact same item show back up at the market price and sell within a matter of days. Yeah, I'm being caustic, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. So read the contracts carefully, be very careful with those. Individual item sales, eBay sales. So, yeah, this is true and not true. I actually wouldn't even recommend eBay anymore, because there used to be some eBay shops where you could come drop your stuff off and they would sell it on eBay for you, and they had good followings. They still exist. They're fewer and further between. If you're going to sell stuff yourself these days, Nextdoor and Facebook Marketplace, use Craigslist to help you determine roughly the market price. Use eBay to help you determine roughly the market price. But the best way, if you're going to sell off, an old sofa or whatever, do it on either Nextdoor, which is a neighborhood listserv, or on Facebook Marketplace. Items that sell well in there are, more basic kinds of, mid-range furniture, Pottery Barn, Crate and Barrel, that kind of stuff, because the market that those two selling environments attract are the families with children between elementary and high school. And that's like sort of the perfect bracket for those types of items, of sofas, tables, and chairs, if you don't have enough to do something larger. All right. So I'm heading into the wrap up here. Any other questions I can answer on that, folks? Am I doing a good job? It's hard to tell. I don't have any, I'm not getting any.
Yes, yes, you are. Thank
Okay.
you.
And
Okay.
Daniel and
Yes.
everyone else that's watching, I did post a link to a feedback form in the chat. If you'd like to share any feedback before you sign off, that would be lovely. But we do have about another, 10 minutes or so.
Which means enough to field some questions. I'm almost there, and then we'll field some questions. So if you think it's expensive to hire a professional to help you sell your stuff, just wait until you hire an amateur. I'm telling you, I've seen it. So how do you hire? You look for experience, you look for references, you look for testimonials, you make sure they have a written contract, you make sure they have all the licensing they're supposed to have, you make sure they have the insurance, and you want to see that they have third-party affiliations, whether that be Angie's List or the National Estate Sales Association or the Virginia Auctioneers or the National Auctioneers Association. Make sure that they have there are other things that help you validate that you're working with a good actor. Right, Helen? All right. So let's help you make some better decisions about what to keep and what to get rid of. This is a pretty simple sounding tool, but it's actually quite powerful. So what do you keep and what do you sell? I use what I call an emotional litmus test. And I use that as a way of determining whether it's something I should keep or get rid of, keep, sell, keep, donate, whatever. Deciding, part of this is also remembering that considering keeping something is not the same as actually keeping. You can think about keeping it and decide that it isn't fit in your new life, and that's a perfectly valid decision. So what is the emotional litmus test? There it is. It's on the screen for you. I remember when, and let's play a game. I remember when Mom and Aunt Betsy went to Rehoboth Beach and they bought that blue Murano glass seagull. Now, if that's where the sentence ends, so what? Who cares? It's just stuff. Now, if the sentence sounds more like this, I remember when Mom and Aunt Betsy went to Rehoboth Beach and they bought that god-awful blue Murano glass seagull and emotional charge and then you get a story about Thrasher's fries and the boardwalk and seagulls coming to attack Mom for her fries or whatever. Now you have something that has not only is it beautiful and it's interesting, but it has a story. So now it's something you should consider keeping. And we recommend that when you're thinking about what to keep, that you go through that process and then you walk away and you give it 24, 36, 48 hours, and you go back and you try to reduce the number of items that you think you want to keep by 50%. And I'm telling you now, you will fail. You will fail spectacularly, and it's okay. It's okay. I'm giving you permission to fail. What will happen is you will probably determine that about 20% of the items that you put aside, that sure, they were worth thinking about, but you don't really need to keep them. And that is what normally happens. We used to use a boxes model. I like this one a little bit better. So we've also determined over time that the average heir, so if you're trying to give stuff to your kids who are adults and have their own homes and don't really want your stuff, that most people can absorb about 6 file boxes worth of stuff from their parents' home into their home. Or if it's not a file box, it's a piece of furniture. So if you choose the secretary desk, you lose a box. Anything more than either 6 furniture items or 6 boxes of mementos, and I'm not talking about their stuff from their room. I'm talking about things that you as parents have in your home as collectibles and beautiful things in your home that they may or may not choose to keep. Anything more than 6 file boxes worth of stuff does not get unpacked. It never gets displayed. And the question becomes, how do I get rid of this? Typically about 18 months after they were brought into their home. So this is a better approach. You decide what you're going to keep. He is, this is a great way for you to make sure you have what you want. Then if the kids want some stuff, you can set some boundaries on that. But at the end of the day, this is all about moving you into the Charles E. Smith community and having it go smoothly and perfectly, and you have the things that you want to make you feel right at home in your new home. So let's see. All right. So I do need a comment here. Michael, thank you so much. It says, glad to hear and see Daniel because he's a nuts and bolts. I'm either nuts or bolts, but nuts and bolts guy and how to take the next step. It's great. I appreciate that. We're almost done here. So one of the resources that we'd like to offer you, and it was provided to the team at the Charles E. Smith Company and to Laura and Jan, and they can share that with you. In fact, I see a note here from Laura that's going to be emailed to all attendees. It's the 4 simple steps for preparing for an estate sale. It tells you the 4 things to tackle in order to get yourselves ready. And I believe the emotional litmus test is at the bottom of the backside of this page. But in a nutshell, it's family photos, family documents, financial records, and deciding what you want to keep. Deciding what you want to keep is the last thing you do. You want to get slightly aggravated by the process because aggravation makes for sharper decision making. Start out by depersonalizing the home, taking down your photos, then deal with your family documents, which are things like family Bibles, birth certificates, death certificates, passports, and keep in mind that a family document does not need to be, specifically does not need to be 2-dimensional. It can be a rocking chair that granddad always read stories in. That's just as much a family document, if you will. And then you deal with the financial records. That's usually dad's office, and it's usually the one that makes everyone want to commit harikari. And then the last thing you do is decide what you're planning on keeping, and you break that into 2 brackets. Things that are practical and I can use them, like a toaster or a blender, or they're emotional, like mom's Yadro collection or whatever it is. Okay. Let me see. Michael says, suppose you're years away from moving but want to reduce clutter now. Can you help? Yes, I can help. Not sure an estate sale is applicable at this time. So we would normally do that on a consignment. You just got to get to enough stuff in enough categories worth enough money to make a consignment to our auction center work. There'd be a pickup fee and a commission for selling the item, but yes, if we can get to enough dollar value worth of interesting stuff, then yes, we can help. So remember, just in closing, remember that when you're talking personal property, in the words of Marlon Brando, it's not business, it's personal. And I want to thank everyone for their time, and I'd be happy to field any questions that people have, because I believe we have about 4 more minutes.
Well, Daniel, this is Laura. I just want to say thank you so much. I mean, this was unbelievably valuable. And I want to say to everyone, if you need more Daniel time, want more information, he's actually doing this again for us live next week at Lakewood Country Club. It's next Wednesday. It'll be from 11 to 12:30. And, you know, please, you're all welcome. Welcome to come back, ask more questions. A couple of things that we want to just mention is we do have this seminar series. We partner with Ring House. And so our next one at Ring House will be April. It's a Wednesday, and it's going to be when and how to sell your home from 11 to 12. And then Wednesday, April 19th, back at Lakewood Country Club, we're offering Moving Mom and Dad. And we talk about the 5 mistakes that adult children make when they believe it's time for their parents to move. And lastly, we have a monthly downsizers club, and it sounds like there's a number of people on this seminar that might really benefit from this. This is really for our clients who are thinking about downsizing, but you're not quite ready. And so we meet once a month. We do it over Zoom, and think of it as like a little support group for people trying to figure out this process. And we have people on the call that are moving in 6 months and 6 years. So it's just really kind of a fun way to share resources and share information and you know, think about this move. Jan, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I don't, but thank you all for joining us today. And Daniel, thank you so much for a really entertaining, informative presentation. And we're looking forward to seeing you in person next week. I'd like to go back to Hannah, who we missed at the beginning of the presentation, to give her an opportunity to briefly introduce herself. She's new on the staff at Charles E. Smith Communities. and we're thrilled to have you. Welcome, Hannah.
Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Hannah. Thanks for having me. This has definitely been really informative, and it's a really big topic that I know can be scary with downsizing.
So we will be sending out the handouts that Daniel provided to everyone who attended via email. We also put a link to a feedback form in the chat for those of you if you'd like to give us some feedback on Daniel's wonderful presentation. We'd certainly appreciate it. And thank you again to Ring House for hosting us. And we'll look forward to seeing you at future Smart Move seminars, second Wednesday of every month at Ring House at 10 a.m. So if
Thank
there are-
you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you. This was very helpful.
Glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Drive safe,
Daniel-
Daniel.
All right, I'm out.
Thank you very
For
much.
Daniel.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Safe drive.
Bye.
Yeah, appreciate it, everything. Thank you.